welcome back. It's Christina Wainwright, the manager at the Pacific Beach Library, and today is day 32. We're finally reaching chapter 38, which is the conclusion of Jane Eyre by Charlotte Brontë. I've said it several times, but I really can't tell you enough how happy I am that we got to take this reading journey together. As I said from the very beginning, Jane Eyre is one of my favorite books, and I have absolutely loved getting to read it together with all of you. It's been just such a treat. And so thank you very much for joining me on this journey. Today, like I said, it's a short chapter. I was hoping I'd get a whole bunch of comments, and I haven't seen a lot of comments from folks about, things we'd like to discuss. So it may be a short discussion, just a little bit of book to read and just a brief little discussion afterwards. But in the meantime, I thought it's a special day. I thought we would celebrate with a special tea. I'm going back to one of the ones we had a couple weeks ago. I'm doing the afternoon Darjeeling loose leaf tea because, if you'll remember, this is the one that it said, they described it as orthodox, autumnal, second flush black tea, elegant and mild, and here's the description that stuck with me, the champagne of tea. And it's a special day. We're celebrating the conclusion of Jane Eyre, so I thought we should celebrate with a little bit of champagne of tea. So our tea today is the afternoon Darjeeling, and of course we want to do the little ceremony with it. We're going to press our tea, pour it out, and then add a bit of sugar and cream because why wouldn't we? It's a beautiful day. We should celebrate with a special tea. So add a little sugar, whoops, maybe a little more sugar than intended. Ooh, somebody's asking if we're doing Pride and Prejudice and zombies? No, just Pride and Prejudice. But that should still be lovely fun. Thank you so much. By the way, I noticed that was a friend of mine from the How To Festival who asked that question. If any of you voted yesterday in the poll that I posted here in our group, thank you so much. One of the other projects I've been working on in between doing these readings with you is helping to plan out the How To Festival that San Diego Public Library is hosting. And in the past, we've always done these in person. And so this is the first year we're doing it digitally or all virtual. And so tomorrow at 11 a.m., the How To Festival is going to go live. There's going to be 50 different videos explaining how to do amazing, fun things taught by our library staff. And I hope that you'll be able to tune in tomorrow and watch it. We're going to be hosting watch parties from 11 until about 1 o'clock, about 2 hours of watch parties every 15 minutes here on Facebook. Or if you just want to go log in later on, it's always available, or at least it will be for several months to come. You can watch the videos whenever you'd like at sandiego.gov/howtofestival. And like I said, there's 50 different videos, lots of stuff to learn and enjoy, and I hope you'll enjoy it as much as we've enjoyed making it. Let's see. So let's try that champagne of teas. Ooh, that's good. I don't know why I'm surprised. It was great the last time we tried it too. Okay, so we should recap our last chapter. I'm wondering too, because I'm hoping that we might get some comments about what things that folks want to discuss, but we'll see. Our last chapter was when Jane went back. She had already gone to Thornfield in our previous day's reading, and she discovered that Thornfield was a burned out ruin and that Mrs. Rochester had passed away and that Mr. Rochester was now at Ferndean. So where we went yesterday in our chapter was she went to Ferndean and she surprised Mr. Rochester in his study, and he was so happy to see her and she him, and the two of them spoke for a while. She got him a little jealous, teasing him about maybe St. John being a romantic interest of hers, just to try to get him out of his doldrums because he was very depressed. Even though he was happy to see her, he was depressed about, how he had changed since he'd last seen her, that he had lost an eye, he'd had one hand amputated, and he just felt like he was not the man he had been when last he had seen her. And so they end up walking, talking, and ultimately he asks her if she will marry him, and she says yes. And so the chapter ends with the two of them hand in hand walking back home. We entered the wood and wended homeward. And it's just so cozy and so sweet. And after all the terrible things that have happened to Jane over the years and over the many chapters, it's just so nice to see her finally be able to be happy and settled with him. So let's go into the conclusion of Jane Eyre by Charlotte Brontë, chapter 38 of our book that we've been reading together. Reader, I married him. A quiet wedding we had, he and I. The parson and the clerk were alone present. When we got back from church, I went into the kitchen of the manor house where Mary was cooking the dinner and John cleaning the knives, and I said, Mary, I have been married to Mr. Rochester this morning. The housekeeper and her husband were both of that decent, phlegmatic order of people to whom one may at any time safely communicate a remarkable piece of news without incurring the danger of having one's ears pierced by some shrill ejaculation, and subsequently stunned by a torrent of wordy wonderment. Mary did look up, and she did stare at me. The ladle with which she was basting a pair of chickens roasting at the fire did for some 3 minutes hang suspended in air, and for the same space of time John's knives also had a rest from the polishing process. But Mary, bending again over the roast, said only, "Have you, miss? Well, for sure." A short time after she pursued, "I seed you go out with the master, but I didn't know you were gone to church to be wed." And she basted away. John, when I turned to him, was grinning from ear to ear. "I telled Mary how it would be," he said. "I knew it, Mr. Edward." John was an old servant and had known his master when he was the cadet of the house, therefore he often gave him his Christian name. "I knew what Mr. Edward would do, and I was certain he would not wait long neither, and he's done right for aught I know. I wish you joy, miss," and he politely pulled his forelock. "Thank you, John. Mr. Rochester told me to give you and Mary this." I put into his hand a 5-pound note. Without waiting to hear more, I left the kitchen. In passing the door of that sanctum some time after, I caught the words, "She'll happen do better for him nor any o' t' grand ladies," and again, "She ben't one of the handsomest. She's known foul and very good-natured, and in his eyen she's fair beautiful. Anybody may see that." I wrote to Moor House and to Cambridge immediately to say what I had done, fully explained also why I had thus acted. Diana and Mary approved the step unreservedly. Diana announced that she would just give me time to get over the honeymoon, and then she would come and see me. "She had better not wait till then, Jane," said Mr. Rochester, when I had read her letter to him. "If she does, she will be too late, for our honeymoon will shine our life long. Its beams will only fade over your grave or mine." How St. John received the news, I don't know. He never answered the letter in which I communicated it. Yet 6 months after, he wrote to me, without, however, mentioning Mr. Rochester's name or alluding to my marriage. His letter was then calm, and though very serious, kind. He has maintained a regular, though not frequent, correspondence ever since. He hopes I am happy, and trusts I am not one of those who live without God in the world and only mind earthly things. You have not quite forgotten little Adele, have you, reader? I had not. I soon asked and obtained leave of Mr. Rochester to go and see her at the school where he had placed her. Her frantic joy at beholding me again moved me much. She looked pale and thin. She said she was not happy. I found the rules of the establishment were too strict, its course of study too severe for a child of her age. I took her home with me. I meant to become her governess once more, but I soon found this impracticable. My time and cares were now required by another. My husband needed them all. So I sought out a school conducted on a more indulgent system, and near enough to permit of my visiting her often and bringing her home sometimes. I took care she should never want for anything that could contribute to her comfort. She soon settled in her new abode, became very happy there, and made fair progress in her studies. As she grew up, a sound English education corrected in a great measure her French defects, and when she left school, I found in her a pleasing and obliging companion, docile, good-tempered, and well-principled. By her grateful attention to me and mine, she has long since well repaid any little kindness I ever had it in my power to offer her. My tale draws to its close. One word respecting my experience of married life, and one brief glance at the fortunes of those whose names I have frequently recurred in this narrative, and I have done. I have now been married 10 years. I know what it is to live entirely for and with what I love best on earth. I hold myself supremely blessed, blessed beyond what language can express, because I am my husband's life as fully as he is mine. No woman was ever nearer to her mate than I am, ever more absolutely bone of his bone and flesh of his flesh. I know no weariness of my Edward's society, he knows none of mine, any more than we each do of the pulsation of the heart that beats in our separate bosoms. Consequently, we are ever together. To be together is for us to be at once as free as in solitude, as gay as in company. We talk, I believe, all day long. To talk to each other is but a more animated and an audible thinking. All my confidence is bestowed on him. All his confidence is devoted to me. We are precisely suited in character. Perfect concord is the result. Mr. Rochester continued blind the first 2 years of our union. Perhaps it was that circumstance that drew us so very near, that knit us so very close, for I was then his vision, as I am still his right hand. Literally, I was, what he often called me, the apple of his eye. He saw nature, he saw books through me, and never did I weary of gazing for his behalf, and of putting into words the effect of field, tree, town, river, cloud, sunbeam, of the landscape before us, of the weather around us, and impressing by sound on his ear what light could no longer stamp on his eye. Never did I weary of reading to him. Never did I weary conducting him where he wished to go, of doing for him what he wished to be done. And there was a pleasure in my services, most full, most exquisite, even though sad, because he claimed these services without painful shame or damping humiliation. He loved me so truly that he knew no reluctance in profiting by my attendance. He felt I loved him so fondly that to yield that attendance was to indulge my sweetest wishes. One morning at the end of the 2 years, as I was writing a letter to his dictation, he came and bent over me and said, "Jane, have you a glittering ornament round your neck?" I had a gold watch chain. I answered yes. "And have you a pale blue dress on?" I had. He informed me then that for some time he had fancied the obscurity clouding one eye was becoming less dense, and that now he was sure of it. He and I went up to London. He had the advice of an eminent oculist, and he eventually recovered the sight of that one eye. He cannot see very distinctly, he cannot read or write much, but he can find his way without being led by the hand. The sky is no longer a blank to him, the earth no longer a void. When his firstborn was put into his arms, he could see that the boy had inherited his own eyes as they once were, large, brilliant, and black. On that occasion he again, with a full heart, acknowledged that God had tempered judgment with mercy. My Edward and I, then, are happy, and the more so because those we most love are happy likewise. Diana and Mary Rivers are both married. Alternately, once every year, they come to see us, and we go to see them. Diana's husband is a captain in the Navy, a gallant officer, and a good man. Mary's is a clergyman, a college friend of her brother's, and, from his attainments and principles, worthy of the connection. Both Captain Fitzjames and Mr. Wharton love their wives and are loved by them. As to St. John Rivers, he left England, he went to India. He entered on the path he had marked for himself, he pursues it still. A more resolute, indefatigable pioneer never wrought amid rocks and dangers. Firm, faithful, and devoted, full of energy and zeal and truth, he labors for his race. He clears their painful way to improvement. He hews down like a giant the prejudices of creed and caste that encumber it. He may be stern, he may be exacting, he may be ambitious yet, but his is the sternness of the warrior Greatheart, who guards his pilgrim convoy from the onslaught of Apollyon. His is the exaction of the apostle, who speaks but for Christ when he says, "Whosoever will come after us." He is the exaction of the apostle, I don't know why I'm so tongue-tied here. His is the exaction of the apostle, who speaks but for Christ when he says, "Whosoever will come after me, let him deny himself, and take up his cross, and follow me." His is the ambition of the high master spirit, which aims to fill a place in the first rank of those who are redeemed from the earth, who stand without fault before the throne of God, who share the last mighty victories of the Lamb, who are called and chosen and faithful. St. John is unmarried. He never will marry now. Himself has hitherto sufficed to the toil, and the toil draws near its close. His glorious sun hastens to its setting. The last letter I received from him drew from my eyes human tears, and yet filled my heart with divine joy. He anticipated his sure reward, his incorruptible crown. I know that a stranger's hand will write to me next, to say that the good and faithful servant has been called at length into the joy of his Lord. And why weep for this? No fear of death will darken St. John's last hour. His mind will be unclouded, his heart will be undaunted, his hope will be sure, his faith steadfast. His own words are a pledge of this. My master, he says, has forewarned me. Daily he announces more distinctly, surely I come quickly, and hourly I more eagerly respond, Amen, even so come, Lord Jesus. And that concludes Jane Eyre by Charlotte Brontë. Okay, so happy. Thank you guys for reading with me. Oh, I'm just gonna look away for a moment because I'm gonna look on my computer because I can see a little easier there. I want to see if any of you guys have any comments to share. If you do, please go ahead and add them. Go ahead and comment now. We can discuss a little bit about the book. I'm just gonna, like I said, log in for it'll just take me a moment to log on. And let me get over to that other window and I can see if there's any comments that you guys have about the reading that we're doing today. And if not, I'll go ahead and share a little of my thoughts on it. But if you have anything that you'd like to discuss or any just thoughts that have come to you, and again, any just reflections, like if this was your first time, did you enjoy the book? Was it something you're like, I was kind of hoping for something different in that ending, or it was the ending you're looking for? I would love to hear what your thoughts are on the book. Yeah, because I've really, really enjoyed this experience of reading together, and you've done so much of listening to me. I would love to get a chance to hear a little bit more about what you're thinking and feeling about the book we just read together. So let me get over here. It's taking its good sweet time loading up. Okay, let's see. I wonder that people call this a Victorian novel. Okay, isn't, and then it gets cut off on my thing. It just says isn't. Let me see if I get more comments on the other side, or if it's still, if that got truncated into a separate comment. And thank you, Judy, for sharing your thoughts. And I know you've read this one before, too. Let's see. Ooh, let's see. Oh, I see that Judy was with Earl Grey and lemon biscotti. It was funny. I was going to, so this is a little offshoot. Because I was saying we should have special treats and a special tea party today, I actually brought in some more preserves from home. This time it was a blueberry lemon preserves. And I still had a little bit of the orange marmalade here. And I was going to have I brought in some bread too so I could toast up some little toast and have jam. And then I realized I can't really have you guys talk while I'm sitting here eating and waiting for you guys to say anything. And that's really not exciting for you guys to watch me eat. I can get away with saying that we can drink together. But yeah, to have you watch me eat doesn't seem appealing at all. So for the tea parties, I hope you guys are eating and enjoying wonderful snacks. Okay, so Judy was just asking, is Brontë earlier? Actually, so when she published here in 1847, I looked this up too before we started. I can look up exactly when the Victorian reign started, but I think it was in the 20s or 30s, because I was also like, wait, it seems unlikely that, the Victorian reign was so long, but at the same time, Victorian era, let's see if we get the dates on that. It says Victorian era was 1837 until her death in 1901. So this book that came out in 1847 was published distinctly in the Victorian era. Now, if we want to say the story when it was set, because if the book, again, if we believe that she was trying to set it in the appropriate time for when it was coming out, so if the book was published in 1847, then conceivably the setting would have been 10 years prior, because we know that, the story ended exactly, the story started in 1837, which was the start of the Victorian era. That means that her childhood would have been in the pre-Victorian era, so in the Georgian period. Thank you, Wikipedia, for telling me that. So yeah, the story would have taken place in the Georgian era, her childhood, and then her years around the start of the Victorian era, when she was getting to know Mr. Rochester and getting married with him. And so that would have been when it was set. Again, the story was published originally as an autobiography edited by Currer Bell, which was the pen name for Charlotte Brontë, because women were not really accepted as authors at that time. And so she had to write under a more, I'm trying to get the right word, a pen name that was that didn't directly indicate her gender. And so she had, so she was Currer Bell. And in a little bit of trivia, if anyone's interested in it, her Her other sister, Emily, who is, of course, the authoress of Wuthering Heights, she published as Ellis Bell. And then Anne Bell, the younger sister, Anne Brontë, the younger sister, who published Agnes Grey and The Tenant of Wildefeld Hall, she published as Acton Bell. So the three Brontë sisters published as the three Bell, possibly brothers. And so, yeah, that was... Initially, though, when it came out, there was some speculation that the book was just edited by somebody named Currer Bell, and it was possibly could be a real autobiography of somebody. So again, it would have been set in the Georgian era for her youth. But it sounds like pretty quickly people did realize it was written by an author, that it was a novel. But for a while, at least in the very beginning, there was speculation that it could have been a real autobiography. All right, let's see. I saw something about Victorian mores. Oh, it does let me look on my phone. I didn't realize. Sorry about that. All this time, I thought I'd do it the other way. So, fulfillment of Victorian social mores. Possible. I mean, if any of you got a chance to watch the John Green video that I posted earlier today. So John Green is a contemporary young adult author, probably best known for The Fault in Our Stars and Looking for Alaska. But he's had a lot of other books. But he did this really fun little series. It's like a crash course on great literature, in conjunction with the Great American Read series that PBS did in 2018, which again I mentioned in our very first talk, and so bringing it back around. Back when they did the Great American Read, PBS was working with the National Endowments of the Arts or Humanities, one of the two, and they were trying to find out like what are the best loved books by American readers, and Jane Eyre was on the top 10. I'm trying to remember the number, and of course right now I'm blanking on it, but it was in the top 10. I feel like it was 7 or 9. And so one of the John Green did a little crash course on the thing, and he talked too about how the Victorian social mores were reflected in Jane Eyre, like a lot of things about how in her youth we see her trying to rebel against the place of women. Several times too we see in the book where characters say to Jane something like, well, that's not feminine. Even St. John, in just a few chapters ago when he was talking about the proposal with her, and she was saying like, I scorn you for this, I think that what you're saying is not right, and she was just standing up for herself, and he came back with, well, what you're doing is not appropriate to a woman, and you shouldn't speak, not just you as a person, but a woman shouldn't dare to speak to me this way. And so, yeah, let's see. The themes of the book fit well into the early Victorian landscape. I think they do, Melissa. Do you want to expound on that a little bit more? Do you want to say how you think they fit into the Victorian landscape? I like it when other people think for me. It's great. I'll go ahead and say a couple of my thoughts on it, but I would love it if you would go ahead and share some of yours too. Let's see. It's interesting too how Jane ends up making her fortune at the end. And yeah, sorry, lost my train of thought because I started thinking about the champagne of teas. It is really good. Let's see. Where are we going? We're talking about the Victorian social mores. So yeah, we see... There's a lot about class in the book too. Like, again, I know that Reader, I Married Him probably is the most famous line of the book. Again, for those of you who maybe hadn't read the book before, that's why every single post that I've started about our chapters or about our read-alouds, I've begun them each with hello readers, because of Reader, I Married Him. That one line is so associated with this book. Yes, Judy just made a comment saying, I so love the 10-year-old Jane standing up for herself against Aunt Reed. She was so feisty throughout. She really was. I was trying to think too, like, I think that part of the, a book hits you at different times of your life. You're going to take different experiences from it. And I know I first read this when I was a little girl. They had it in the juvenile section at the library I used to go to. And I think, as a little kid, you read that story and you go like, yeah, stand up for yourself. And like, you tell her, like, you deserve to be heard. And Jane actually is just amazing in that. Like, for a young girl, any young child, to be able to stand up to a grown-up who's an authority figure to say, I deserve better than that, I shouldn't be treated that way, it's impressive. But especially when you put it in the Victorian context of children should be seen and not heard, and especially a girl child or an orphan child, somebody without any property, somebody without any connections, for her to stand up to her aunt and say to her, what you did was wrong. that, you know, that I'm a person and that I deserve to be treated better. It was a really powerful scene. And, you know, I think that's probably, too, as a little kid, why it stuck with me, like, yeah, I deserve better. We all feel our indignities, I think. Let's see. Yeah. It's funny. So, oh, sorry, going back. So I always start our passages with reader because the reader, I married him. But I feel like there's so many other passages that are just so beautiful. I mean, we've talked about several of them, and you guys already know, I'm sure, that some of my favorites are the scene with Helen Burns when she talks about how as long as you are living by your conviction, as long as you are knowing that, oh gosh, let me find it. I love it so much. My book went right to it. Again, if all the world hated you and believed you wicked, while your own conscience approved you and absolved you from guilt, you would not be without friends. I just love it. And then, of course, the other scene, too. I think my other favorite passages, you know, for Jane standing up for herself is when she speaks to Mr. Rochester by the tree that eventually gets lightning struck on the night of their first engagement. And she says to him how, let's see if I can find it. She says to him, yeah, just that she is his equal. Do you think I can stay and become nothing more to you? Do you think I am an automaton, a machine without feelings, and can bear to have my morsel of bread snatched from my lips and my drop of living water dashed from my cup? Do you think because I am poor, obscure, plain and little, I am soulless and heartless? I mean, that's just beautiful. That's something that I think that stands up now. You think wrong. I have as much soul as you and full as much heart. It's beautiful. I am not talking to you now through the medium of custom conventionalities, nor even of mortal flesh. It is my spirit that addresses your spirit, just as if both had passed through the grave and we stood at God's feet, equal as we are. Ooh, thank you, Scripps Miramar Ranch. You guys are also likening this to Little Women, which of course I also love and read many, many times. And that one I did manage to buy the Junior Illustrated Library Edition at the library book sale later on, and so I have the Illustrated Women plates. Maybe later on we can read that some other time too. But yeah, the Little Women characters were great also. Yeah, it's good to, it was such a, I think it's an empowering thing to read a book about folk, well, that sounds silly to say it, but it's a good thing to read books that speak to you, that inspire you. Oh, let's see. Yeah, and in Little Women also, we see them try to forge their path. What I also really appreciate about Little Women, similar to Jane Eyre, is that they don't always do the right thing. The characters are sometimes, they realize they made mistakes. Like in Jane Eyre, we know that she has a bad temper. She's basically, she said it, you know, the Brontë describes it about her, that she is calm, 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 until suddenly she explodes, and she just, you know, she can't take it anymore. And we see kind of this similar thing in Little Women, where where Jo is, you know, she has a bad temper. She says things she regrets later on. She does things that she's not proud of, and actually most of the characters do something they're not proud of. Like Amy is silly with the pickled limes, and so, you know, all of these characters, I think what makes them so endearing is that they're so real. Flawed characters are more interest, perfect ones are boring. So true, so true. Alrighty, let's see. Are there any other thoughts you guys would like to share? Any other discussions you'd like to have? Any things you'd like to discuss about Jane Eyre? Because I have another half mug of the champagne of tea. Comments on Wide Sargasso Sea. You know, Bill was just asking about that. I have actually never read that, and I've wanted to. So for anyone who has read it, I would love to hear your comments on it. So The Wide Sargasso Sea is a book by, I'm going to mispronounce the name. I pronounce it, again, I'm a reader, not a talker sometimes. I pronounce it as Jean Rhys, and so I might be butchering that, but it's Jean, and the author's last name is Rhys. And so Wide Sargasso Sea is a look at the story of Bertha Mason, the first wife of Mr. Rochester, the one that we only see in this book as a mad woman locked in the attic and then coming down to wreak havoc on Thornfield Hall and its residents or visitors. In Wide Sargasso Sea, from what I understand, the book looks at her life from her perspective, and it is like her name was actually Antoinetta, and she was she had a fuller life than what Mr. Rochester gives her credit for and what Brontë describes her as. Let's see. Okay, hang on. I've got to go back here. So Judy said she'd never heard of the book, and I've never read it, although I have wanted to for years. Melissa says, and how the characters reap what they sow in terms of their firmness of morals is depicted in the book, being ultimately rewarded and punished. So I'd be curious about that too. I'm guessing you're saying that in regards to White Sargasso Sea and seeing how Rochester and Bertha / Antoinetta Mason, I'm thinking that's what you're referring to. I'm curious to know Bill's thoughts on it too, though, because I'm hoping, did you actually read the book already, Bill? Can you tell us a little bit more about it? Like, do you feel like it, I mean, you have to have a better appreciation for Bertha as a character, because here she's so one-dimensional. All she is, you know, she's somebody, so he barely sees her as a person. John Green, in his characterization, when he talked about the thing, he said Bertha is characterized basically as between the world of human and animal, which is absolutely not fair to her. But again, that's how Jane is going to see her, because she's only going to see the rightness of what Mr. Rochester says. That's her bias in this book. But yeah, it would be interesting to see more, or to have a fuller picture of what brought Mrs. Mason, or sorry, Bertha Mason / Rochester to that state. Like, did she actually lose her mind? I mean, the implication in the book and in a bunch of the footnotes in my thing is that the reason she lost her mind is that she had madness in the family, but also that she was a big drinker, that she was quite promiscuous, and that somehow she got syphilis and it rotted her brain out. So there's a bit of, that's the implication that Rochester gives and that the footnotes in this edition give. But I'd be curious to see what, how John Reeves does it. Or Bill's also not read it, just heard of it. Same. It is on my list also. I briefly thought that it might be a fun thing to read that one right after this, to suggest it, and then I realized, it's too modern. It only came out, within the last 100 years, so unfortunately it's still protected by copyright. I did not look, though, to see if we have it in the e-collection. I'll check on that afterwards. If we do have it in the e-collection, I'll go ahead and post a link. If it's not available in the e-collection, I'm going to do a plug, too, for the new thing that San Diego Public Library is doing. We have actually started providing contactless pickup service at 11 of our 36 locations, and starting next Monday on June the 1st, you can actually start placing fresh holds. So if there is a digital copy of White Sargasso Sea available, I'll go ahead and post that link in the thing, and otherwise I'll post a link to our catalog, and then starting on Monday, if you'd like to place a hold on that, you'd be able to do so and have that shipped to one of the 11 branches that are providing pickup service in our system. Let's see. Ooh, speaking of Monday, also, ready for the transition? We're going to start reading Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, and curious again, too, to know who's already read it, who hasn't read it. I read this one, I read it years ago, and it's one of those things, I had heard it was a very important classic book, and I read it as a kid, and I remember at that time, I didn't love it when the first time I read it, because I was like, it went over my head. It was a little too stilted. But then when I read it again several years later, I was like, oh my gosh, it's great. It's a look at class. It's a look at love. It's so funny. It's really well written. For anyone who has not yet read the book, I hope you'll enjoy reading it with us again. If you have already read it, you're probably going to want to enjoy reading it again with us. So yeah, we'll be starting that next Monday, June the 1st, again at 3 o'clock every weekday. Well, I don't see any more comments coming in, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up for today. Again, I have loved reading Jane Eyre with you. Thank you guys so much for taking this journey with me. Thank you for joining me, I hope, on our next path to read Pride and Prejudice together. And I will see you guys later. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Hope you have a lovely weekend, perhaps with the How To Festival as part of your weekend. Oh, I see another thing. Thanks for reading so loud to us. You read Jane Eyre the first time several years ago, and somehow... Somehow I missed reading Jane Eyre as a girl or teen, but I didn't read it till I was an adult. It is a lovely book, though. I think, again, you just get a different experience as a grown-up than you would as a child, and they're both wonderful. Somehow I missed reading Jane Eyre as a girl or teen, but didn't read it until I was an adult. Loved it. The story seemed to me one part Annie, one part Sound and Music. Yes! Governess stories. And one part a story all its own. Jane Eyre is fabulously independent thinking woman. Oh. Yeah. Thanks, Pam. That's a lovely, lovely observation. Again, I could just be I could just sit here with you guys smiling, and that's probably not great media for you guys, but I'm just so happy. It has been such a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you for the next book. Oh, and I don't know, because Judy just commented, I want to thank her again for providing the illustrations from her illustrated edition of Jane Eyre. As we start reading Pride and Prejudice, if any of you has an illustrated edition, we can start up another album for those, but I love seeing the illustrations. I love seeing these stories shown in a different way than what we imagine in our mind. So thank you guys so much. I'm going to go ahead and sign off now, but it's not over. We're going to keep reading Pride and Prejudice together. But for now, one last time, let's say goodbye to Jane. Thank you guys so much. I've really enjoyed doing this with you. Bye.